people are just coming up to thank you because it's a big open kitchen. And like, that was one of the best things I've ever eaten. And we're not doing neurosurgery, you know, we're just cooking for people. But if you can give someone something that makes them leave with that smile, then, you know, I'm pretty damn happy with that.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. The Amalfi Coast and the islands of the Aegean Sea are dream destinations for many people looking for sun and simple, sun-kissed food. It's not surprising that the Mediterranean diet works down under, but what are the challenges in bringing these experiences and flavours into a restaurant setting? Christian Ryan is the chef and co-owner of Aloft, a new restaurant, Maria, in Hobart, Tasmania. Christian, how are you?
Good, thanks. Thank you for having me.
It's awesome to get you on the show. You've been doing amazing things down there in Hobart at Aloft, but you've added a new restaurant, Maria. How are things going?
Good. We are 1 week in. So I guess for me, it feels like this project's been going for the last year. So, you know, I'm super critical of all of it because, you know, I've done this before with Aloft, and a second time round, I kind of want to pick up on the things that I missed the first time. And so I sat down at the end of last week and I was like, there's so many things that I want to fix. And everyone's like, just remember it's only been a week. So like, it's all little things, but you know, it's nice to see them and be a bit more aware this time around. But the feedback's been overwhelmingly positive, and bookings are looking good considering that it's winter down here. So it's a nice time to sort of warm up before we hit summer head on.
Well, that's good to hear. It's interesting what you say about, you know, the restaurant's only been open a week, but it's such a long build up for the owners and the staff to that time. What was it like when you finally opened the doors and the vision became real?
It's a weird one because as we got closer, you know, every time a little project would finish and another one would start, I was like, well, when the tiles are down, it's going to feel real. Or when the linen's in, it's going to feel real. Or when the speakers come in, it's going to feel real. But every single part kind of happened and it just kind of felt like one ongoing process. And then finally we're like, well, the doors are open. And for me, it kind of just felt like another day. It was really weird. It was really exciting to have the events that we had and the cocktail party and be able to celebrate it. But I don't think I've had the chance to actually sit back in the window, open, no one else in there, and just sort of take it all in. I think in a couple of weeks' time, when I've got caught up on the 1,000 emails in my inbox, etc., I will be able to sit back and then relax a little bit and enjoy.
That's interesting, that sentence, to sit back and take it all in, but that's really what you're creating for guests there with that Mediterranean offering and the water there. Tell us about the decision to go down that path and create a restaurant like Maria.
Look, it's something that I really like to eat. It really comes back to about, COVID times. I spent 3 months in lockdown, which was an interesting time for everybody. It was probably a lot easier for Tasmanians than it was for some of the bigger states that went through it so much. But that was a nice kind of, look, there's a silver lining to COVID. A lot of horrible things happened, but it was nice to take a break where you sat back and appreciated being at home. For me, being a chef, the only time I ever take leave is if I'm going somewhere. I never take time to work on my house or do those sorts of things. So I was sitting around a lot. We were perfectly timed to watch a whole season of MasterChef, and me and my sous chef at the time would sit there at night and decide when we'd start drinking and then start watching that and texting each other. And I watched a lot of food TV and I read a lot of books, which, considering how big my book collection is, I don't find a lot of time to do. And I just missed that sort of Mediterranean style food that was simple but full of flavors. And it was something I couldn't find over that time. And I sort of daydreamed about it a lot. And I kind of came up with this idea that if I was going to open another business, and it was a very big if because Aloft was a huge set of challenges when that was opened, that I wanted to sort of go down that path and learn as much about it and be inspired by it. So fortunately, you know, the space popped up just over a year ago, and I was already booked for a wedding in Greece 2 weeks after the space popped up. So I managed to go and soak up lots of Greece and Italy firsthand, but it was perfect timing.
Take us on that journey that you went over to the Mediterranean. Do you have some stories of the experiences that you had that has inspired you?
Yeah, the Mediterranean holiday was 5 weeks, and it was 5 weeks with a 1-year-old, who had just learnt to walk on the plane on the way over. So that was interesting. I wasn't going over there to do fine dining. I wanted to have street food. I wanted to have tavernas, and I really wanted to have a relaxed food. But he made it a challenge as wanting to walk around. We had to take turns, my partner and I. One would eat while the other one would go wandering. So it made for a bit of a challenge, and it kind of almost made eating out sometimes a little bit anxiety ridden because you just didn't know how he was going to behave, and you didn't want to be that guy bringing a screaming 1-year-old into a nice restaurant. That paired with the fact that we were there for the biggest heat wave they'd ever had. So I think it was 2 solid weeks in Italy and Greece of over 36 degrees. I remember one morning we woke up on Corfu where the wedding was, and we looked at the temperature for the day, and it was a pleasant change because it was only going to be 36. But it made for such a challenge. So you get up early, which you do with a 1-year-old anyway, and we go out and sort of eat a little bit and then sleep the biggest, hottest part of the day away. And then we get back up later and go and eat some more. So it was definitely a challenge, but it really made it easy to sort of enjoy things like amazing gyros and octopus from street vendors, and just kind of, we did a lot of wandering. It wasn't a relaxing holiday, but that wandering made me see a lot of little side stalls and a lot of ingredients and things that actually tied in a lot more with the produce and the ingredients we have down here than I ever expected, which was kind of fun when I came back putting together the start of the menu.
Tell us about some of the things that you did eat on those sort of meandering walks and trips while you're over in the Mediterranean that really sort of lit your fire about it.
Some of the things that I found really cool, we went to Croatia as well. And, everyone knows lavender is synonymous with Tasmania. We've got our lavender bears and we've got our flowing fields of lavender. And done the wrong way, it kind of reminds you of an old lady's underwear drawer, is that potpourri sort of smell that it has, But they were using it all down the coast of Croatia. And I was like, this is really cool. So we came back here and we found some amazing honey from the east coast of Tasmania that was infused with, pollen or bees that had pollinated from lavender. And that was really cool. And then, I grew up down here wandering around a lot, adventuring as a kid in the 90s. And a lot of the fields or like spare blocks around where I used to live were full of wild fennel and the big yellow wild fennel flowers on top. The smell is so distinct. And then so walking down the hills in Santorini, just out of alleyways, there was wild fennel popping up everywhere. And it was so cool because I was like, I'm on the other side of the world, but smelling this takes me back to my childhood, in Sandy Bay in Hobart. And then being able to utilize those things. So we knew we weren't going to be open for summer. So I spent a good portion of summer out whenever I wasn't at work, harvesting as much wild fennel pollen as I could use. I put a lot into sugar. I macerated some into vinegars, and we do them with oysters now. But to have that strong anise flavor from something so local, and it works amazingly with the oysters, but it really takes you back to the ouzos and all of those other flavors that are synonymous with Greek food.
You came back inspired by the casual experiences that you had in the Mediterranean, but was it challenging translating that into a restaurant setting?
Well, that's big challenge, was because, I always, when I opened Aloft, I wanted it to be a lot more relaxed than it actually was. It ended up being quite more refined than and that refinement has grown over the years. We hit 9 in a few months. To think that the restaurant's been open for almost a decade blows my mind. But it's such a different restaurant now to when it opened. But then, in speaking of that, the refinement is there, and we kind of building. It kind of backs to Maria, but building Aloft, it was trying to have that experience of refined food and service while still having fun service and music that's a little bit too loud and staff that are a little bit too flamboyant. And I think that's this kind of like seesaw that we're on, that we've perfectly balanced in the middle for us, where people come in expecting potentially a really stuffy experience, and they come out going, that was really fun. And different to what I expected. And the food was, although it's slightly refined, the flavors are super approachable, which is what we aim for. And a lot of people who come in going, I don't like fine dining, you know, I'm being dragged in by my misso and I want steak and chips. Somehow we can turn around the whole meal for them and they'll be like, I wouldn't have ordered any of that stuff, but I really enjoyed it. So then when we got to Maria, we were like, how do we we know we have a system that works for us and it's been fantastic and it's been very lucrative as a business. And we want to kind of work off that so the staff can because the restaurants are right above and below each other, which is fantastic. I can kind of be in both of them at the same time. But we wanted the staff to be able to be between the two and keep those systems that we knew worked and almost carbon copy the basics and then put a whole new face over it. So I really wanted the food to be refined and approachable. I think we were calling it rustic yet refined. But then the space itself, I had these. It's such an amazing space. It stares out over the water. It's got big opening windows so you can hear the water, you can smell it, you can see the boats and the birds. And then we started building what I had was a concept in my head. I was quite thorough in what I wanted. You know, we've got amazing stone tiles from Italy and we've got Venetian plaster, which is the most ridiculous per square meter I've ever seen. But it just made it. We didn't want it at any stage to feel like we tried to fake it. We wanted you to walk into this space and feel like maybe you're not in Hobart or maybe you're not even in this time because it's got a real like sort of vintage travel 60s vibe that we've put to it. And that is because I've always been slightly obsessed with that time. I wasn't alive for it, but there's that certain romance and nostalgia of, you know, the 60s and travel when, you know, you had to catch 4 planes to get across the world and, you know, to see places you saw the big posters in the travel agents. And I think that's a really cool time where travel was exclusive and a lot more innocent. So I had that as the back concept in my mind and it was how to try and get that into the space. And although I wanted to make the space quite relaxed and carefree, as we continued building, we just sort of felt like the only way to make this space what it should be and give it the justice that it deserves was to go all out on it. So, you know, the only thing we kept from the original space down there that was night and day to what we've got now was these big marble bar fronts. It's beautiful marble. It's got shades of terracotta and cream and stuff through it. So then we went and we found the same quarry that marble came from and we made it all our tabletops out of the same. And, you know, there's copper and brass and so much linen because it's a giant glass house pretty much. So there's no real walls in it. It's just glass all the way around. So we kind of wanted to make it more like an inside space without taking away that. So we found this beautiful flowing linen that runs along the sides. So you can see the light through it. And even in those gloomy days of winter that we've had while building, you still get a nice summery sort of warm vibe in there. And I want that vibe of summer all year round, kind of like a place where you go into and you're like, I don't want to leave here. And then when you do leave, you want to bring everybody, you know, back and show it off because it's just different to everything else. And I didn't want to copy. Hobart's such a small place. I didn't want to be the same as anybody else.
Well, I want to explore sort of what you're doing there at Maria in detail and also delve into the world of Aloft. But take us back to when you were young. You mentioned Sandy Bay. What was food like for you growing up? Food
for me growing up was everything. Like my mum cooked for us every night of the week and she loved it. And to be honest, apart from this one time she made curried sausages and she's never doing that again, I don't remember ever having a bad meal that I didn't enjoy. And I kind of just thought that was the norm. I thought growing up, everybody ate like that. And then as I started getting older, all my friends would come around and they're like, your mum's cooking tonight, yeah? And I'm like, yeah, of course, she cooks every night. And they loved it. And then I discovered that not everyone, you know, was lucky enough to have parents as passionate about food as mine. My dad didn't really cook. He could do a steak, but he didn't need to because mum loved cooking. And it wasn't, you know, meat and 3 veg. It changed. She would constantly go through books and magazines and all food from, you know, all over the world. It could be Asian, it could be curries, it could be, you know, something from our Polish heritage. But there was always something different she was working on or wanting to try out on us. And it was just such an amazing kind of time to grow up having that, because it made food the center of every day. And that, I guess, built to where I am today. Maria is named after my mum, whose middle name is Maria. So that kind of was a lot of inspiration for me. And that's how I found my feet in food. I definitely didn't think I wanted to be a chef. I went to a private all boys school, and, everybody there it was a really expensive school, and everyone was like working to do big things. And then I kind of just fell into it. I got offered a job as a dishwasher. I wasn't very academic at school. I'm a work with my hands, not with my head sort of person. And so I got offered this job, and I was a dishwasher. Then I was a pizza boy. Eventually they offered me an apprenticeship, and I was going to finish school at the end of year 11 and start early. And I went home and I told mum and Dad's like, you don't even know how to boil water and you want to be a chef. And I was like, to be honest, he wasn't wrong. Like I never cooked with mum. I was so lucky being fed that I didn't need to get in the kitchen. I was too busy off causing dramas, doing other things. But mum kind of said, look, you've stuck through school for this whole time. Why don't you just see out year 12? And the boys joke that I always wanted a leavers top, and I wasn't going to get that if I finished a year early. So I probably wore that leavers top once. But yeah, I stuck out. I did year 12 working pretty much all my nights while I was finishing school. Didn't get great points. No surprise to anyone. But I started my apprenticeship as soon as I finished school, and then from there, it was just the long progression of 20 years plus of cooking now, which blows my mind because it doesn't feel like it was 20 years since I finished school.
Take us through the early years of your career. What were the really sort of important people and venues that helped shape you?
My career started off in probably one of Hobart's longest running establishments, Angelo's. So it's an Italian restaurant. It's in Battery Point. It's just hit 30 years this year. And it's consistently busy every day of the week, all year round. Angelo and Marco, the perfect hosts. They know everybody who walks in. They remember them every time. And to be honest, no matter how full they are or how past capacity they are, they'll always do what they can to get you a table and make it work. And they make it effortless. And so working there, it was really big for me learning consistency and also speed. The menu, by and large, hasn't changed in the last 30 years, but it's so cool because, if I'm having a lazy night, we'll get takeaway, and it's exactly the same as it was when I was having my staff meal or knocking off my shift there back in 2004. Nothing's changed. And that's, I guess, what keeps them busy. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. And that's been so fun. So I had to work pretty hard and fast to survive there. And, as I wasn't planning to be a chef, I did get in a little bit of trouble. Was that, the same as school. I was a distraction to myself and to others. So, I got sat down quite a few times saying you needed to pull it together. And then towards my third year of my apprenticeship, they sat me down. They said, look, we love you. You're great, but maybe this isn't for you. And, you don't have to leave, but have a look for another job. And if you find one, we'll support you in it. And I don't know, something around about that time clicked. I went over to Melbourne and I went to Interlude, Robin Wicken's restaurant, and it was the first time I'd ever had a proper refined meal. And it just all clicked and made sense. And then a few months later, I went over and went to Voudemont back on Little Collins Street, and everything sort of started to make sense. I saw it from a different light. I wanted it to be different to what I was doing. I suddenly started working a lot harder then, and Angelo said, you don't have to leave if you don't want to. But at that time, I knew what I needed to do, and I kind of moved just for a few months to another venue, and then I went to Melbourne where I worked at Taxi Dining Room back in the day with Michael Lambie and Tony and Perry, which was amazing. Still to this day, one of the best teams I've ever worked with and the best fun. My cooking career, it's a weird one, but I've always been in a relationship, not the same one, different ones, but that's kind of also helped dictate what I do with work. You know, it was always, if I was going somewhere, it was a long distance relationship where I was thinking half about the kitchen and half about, you know, visiting home. Or if I was traveling with a partner, I was only working for as long as they were working before they needed to go back home for uni or something. So had I been on a different path and had I gone far away, if I wasn't in a relationship, maybe I would have gone and traveled for years and gone on a different path. But it all kind of led to this path here, and I've got no problems with that. Actually, it's been the best path I could have taken. But after being in taxi dining room, I came back to Hobart, saved some money, and a partner and I were going to go travel. So we went to South America, and then we went to London, where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I sent a few resumes out to hatted restaurants. I did a stage at the Ledbury, which was crazy and fun, but terrifying at the same time. I spent most of the day backpacking there. Once one guy saw you on the backpack machine, everybody knew you were there for the day. So that was fun. And then I went to Gordon Ramsay Holdings and I dropped in a resume. You know, everyone knows Gordon. It sounded like an exciting thing to do. And it just so happened that they were starting to ramp up on the reopening of the Savoy Grill in the Savoy Hotel, which, you know, had been around for, you know, Escoffier worked in that kitchen back in the day. I didn't realize how big of an adventure it was at the time, but I managed to do a trial and I got in on the opening team. So, the head and the sous chef and 4 other chefs, including me, we went out to Heathrow every day for 3 months and used the excess space in the Gordon Ramsay plain food kitchen where we were working on a menu. And then one day we had a soft sort of menu launch where we came into Royal Hospital Road on a day it was shut. And we cooked the menu for Gordon and every one of his head chefs. Still at that stage, I was a young chef. I didn't realize the caliber of people I was cooking for. But, you know, I met Gordon, came in and, hey, big dog, and he was friendly to everyone. And he's a huge guy. You know, you stand next to him and he doesn't look as big as he is on TV. So that was kind of cool. And then we finally moved into the Savoy, and it was the biggest opening of the year that year. We had Tom Jones was in every Sunday night. Gordon would wander through the kitchen with the Beckhams, and, you know, you get to talk to them. One day, Alexander Downer came in. I think I was the only person in there who knew who he was. But for me, it was a buzz. I'm like, I know you. I've seen you on TV. One day we had to shut the restaurant so Duran could film a film clip in the dining room. So we all just had to go outside and they all just chain smoked for about 4 hours while they did that. But it was such an amazing experience, and I've still got lifelong friends from that. I made the mistake of telling the head chef. I thought I'd be honest, and I say, "Hey, I'm gonna see out this year." I'd gone through a breakup again. I was like, "I'm going to go home at the end of this year, figure out what I want to do." My visa only had a year and a half left on it, and I was honest to him. I thought this would be good. You know, he'll appreciate knowing this. But I stitched myself up, and then from then on there, I was never in the line for any promotions or anything like that. I was just the man who was just seeing out his time. So I won't make that mistake again. But I really loved my time there. And it was just such a cool and amazing experience. Like, Gordon wasn't around heaps, and he was scary, but everybody was there to do a good job and to work hard. So no one really got in trouble for no reason. It was the sous chefs who were trying to get their way up to run restaurants. They were the ones that were after you. Like, there was an Albanian guy, and he'd just yell at me for the way I'd hold my tea towel. And no matter how I did it, it was either too folded or it wasn't folded enough. And I was never going to do right, but their job was just to work their way to the top of the ladder. And I commend them. They've all done amazing things since then. But that, you know, the camaraderie was good, but there was fear. There was definitely fear in those kitchens.
What was it like for you when you came back to Australia?
I came back with the plan to get another visa and go again. I booked my flight home 6 months out, and it was those last 6 months. Maybe it was knowing I was going home. Maybe it's the fact that I got past that breakup. But, you know, I was really enjoying it. And I was like, I don't want to go home now. So I want to come back. You know, I wanted to be sponsored, but I was too old at that stage. And, you know, I wasn't a role that couldn't be replaced by somebody who lived there. And that was part of the sponsorship. So I had Polish heritage and I wanted to come back and get into that. But when I got back to Hobart, I found that something had kind of changed. Mona was probably the catalyst for that. It was a different, before I left, there was one, maybe two restaurants. You go to Garage East, you go to Mark IV. People would fly down on a Friday and fly out on a Sunday morning because they'd done both restaurants, any food tourists anyway, and they didn't really want to be here any longer. But everything was changing, and we had dark mofos and summer mofos and all those events, and Hobart grew, and it has kept growing. And I think the best thing about Hobart's growth is that it hasn't relied solely on Mona. I know a lot of places just, work around a place. Everybody started pushing on their own, doing their own thing and working alongside Mona, not behind it, which has made such an amazing time to be down here. I worked at the Source. My first job back was at Mona, which was really awesome. I got to see some amazing events and be there for some great launches. And then I got offered my first head chef role to run a cafe called Pilgrim, which is, Pilgrim's been around for at least 10, 11 years now, under Will Priestley, who is now my business partner in 3 different ventures. So we are together in Aloft and The Standard, which is a burger joint we've had for about 9 years. We also have Maria together. So Will's been great. He kind of gives me the trust and the freedom to just step back and be the support if I need it. But he, sometimes the advice he gives me is not what I want to hear, but it's always pretty solid advice. But he just lets me do my thing. And as long as I'm not doing anything too outlandish, then we don't have any dramas, which is kind of cool. And, Pilgrim was different back in the day. There's a lot of cafes around now doing a lot of things, but back in those days, 10 years ago, it would be almost breakfast was a different scene here. No one had done waffles or crumpets or, it was a pretty solid in Hobart breakfast scene. And we started we were doing rabbit for breakfast or, soft shell crab. And we got to a stage where we would have lines out the door on a Sunday and on a Saturday, and especially over periods like Dark Mofo. And that blew my mind just to see how crazy we got mentioned in Gourmet Traveller and restaurant guides for our little cafe venture. And we had a kitchen where we cooked on milk crates most of the time. It was not a kitchen built, and we had one giant Coke fridge down a staircase that would sometimes collapse on you. It was quite the adventure, but it was the nice catalyst for Aloft after that. And I have a chef, Andy Russell, who is now working under me at Maria. He'll be the head chef soon, and I'll figure out what my role is between the two businesses. But he worked with me then. We were both at Mona, and then he came and worked with me there, and we've gone off and done our other things. But he's come back now, and it's really exciting to be cooking together again and reminiscing about the days of the crumpets mid-service and the slow eggs. So many slow eggs. Oh, I still have flashbacks about those things. It was funny. One morning we were there, and we used to have a customer that looked just like Renee Redzepi. And the waitress at the time was like, "Oh, Renee Redzepi's out here." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that joke doesn't get old." And she's like, "No, seriously, Renee Redzepi's out here." And we popped our head through the little swinging door, and sure enough, it was Renee and 2 of his chefs who were down doing research for the Australia pop-up with Noma that they did. And we cooked him, all he wanted was fried egg on toast, and that's all we gave him. And it was pretty surreal to have this tiny little cafe at the bottom of the world and be looking at the #1 chef in the world in your dining room. But that was a cool little experience.
Well, how did Aloft come about?
Aloft was a space that came up that was too good to say no to, but a time well before we were ready to open a restaurant. There's this beautiful Brook Street Pier where Aloft is, and Will had a little coffee shop downstairs called Bright Eyes at the time, and he's like, "Hey, upstairs, I think what was going in there has fallen through. We should have a look at it." He knew I wanted to open something, and I kind of had to push him a lot in the end and say, he's just like, "Oh, this is a big endeavor. Are we ready for this?" And I wasn't. Like, I reckon I could have gone another 10 years before I ran my own proper business, but a spot like that wasn't going to come up again. So we kind of had to make the choice to make it happen. So we went out and we found a couple that we'd done a Christmas party for. They were both doctors, Paul and Asha, and they had the faith to invest in us, which was amazing. They put a huge amount of money with we didn't have anything to add, but they did that, and they had faith in us, and they were very patient, waiting for returns. And um, we started out building this space it was literally just nothing but chipboard, floor to ceiling. There was no ventilation shafts, there was no hoods, there was no grease trap, and it was a much bigger endeavor than we planned for. And I don't think we realized it really did put us into a lot of debt that first time, just because builders worked slower and we didn't know how to run a business in the beginning with staffing, with all those sorts of things. So we opened that with a lot of debt, and there was a very, very sharp learning curve. And I'd say the hardest thing I've ever done in my life was the first 4 years here. We had a lot of people. I didn't feel ready to be a head chef. I still don't most days, to be honest. I don't have the most confidence in myself and my cooking. It seems that people enjoy it and it seems to be going fine, and I love that. But at no stage do I feel like a confident chef. I could never go on something like MasterChef where I had to make something out of a mystery box. For me, I can put together a dish, but it takes a lot of hours of thinking and working and back and forthing. I'm not one of those on the spot creatives. So I don't change the menu here once a week. It just changes naturally as things come about. But we had a full team here full of amazing people with experience. But I think one of the biggest hardships was probably that old saying that too many cooks spoil the broth. There was a lot of people, and not a lot of them had money in the business, but everybody had a strong thought and way on the direction of the business and how it should go. And everybody cared, and it was in everybody's, everyone was trying to work together, but it just ended up quite messy. And me being the sort of passive, don't like to make a fuss chef, I'd kind of just sit back, and I was more worried about losing everybody and not having the skills to run it by myself, especially with that sort of debt. And it was a hard time. Like, put me through a counseling for a while, just trying to figure the anxiety and stuff out, which I think a lot of people who have small businesses, deal with. You're working to pay back the builders, and then while you're doing that, you're not paying anything else, and then all of a sudden you're behind on rent, and then all of a sudden you're behind on the ATO, and it's just one thing you'd sort, and then another thing would be right behind it, and it just took so long to find its feet. And there was a period before COVID where I was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I actually thought about being a paramedic for a while. I was just like, you know what? Yeah, it was a part of me. I was just like, I'm not enjoying it, the stress, and it was just like 4 years of relentless stress. And it had great times. Like, I enjoyed the team. I loved the people I worked with. But even after, a lot of the people left and went on to do their own things, I still didn't feel like it was my own business or confident enough to put on a menu that I thought was good. It was still trying to work from inspirations from other people and not so much me. So then when COVID happened, it was around about the same time. It was probably, it was 6 months earlier that I'd been talking about getting out. And then I sat through COVID and I missed cooking, and I was dreaming about potentially another restaurant, I thought in my head, if I did another restaurant, Aloft wouldn't exist. I didn't think for a long time Aloft would make it through COVID, but we had an amazing team on the pier. The landlords gave us a good period of rent-free, which was amazing, and then back to half rent, which gave us a chance to claw our way. And having that time, that 3 months to sit and read and be inspired, I came back with a whole new mindset. We'd always talked, back in the day, we had a chef's menu, we had an a la carte menu. We were just trying to get as many people in as we could and make the money we could to be, a business that made money. And I found that once we reopened, we got rid of the a la carte, because no one ever people might have had a good time on the a la carte, but no one had a great time. Someone might have the pig's ears and they'd say, oh, that was good, but it was too salty. And someone might have the kingfish and they're like, well, that was good, but it was really citrusy. And I love the punchy flavors. I think everything for me has to be full on. But having that chance to shut the door for 3 months, have no bookings, no one to kind of let down saying, oh, when I booked, I wasn't going to do chef's menu. We reopened and we were like, right, we kind of disguised it under the banner of COVID because we needed to. And we're like, for now on, we're just going to be doing chef's menu. We're going to have a wine match. We're going to do less people, but have more structure in what we do. And so all of a sudden we were curating a menu. It wasn't, financially it's great, a chef's menu when it works. But I think if you're going to tell people what they have to eat, you have to make sure that you're going to give them the best they possibly can. And they have to go out going, I might not have ordered that if I didn't have to, but I'm damn sure I'm happy that I did. And so we worked with people like, I guess we got the wine match on. That was fantastic. We got the chef's menu on, and people were really enjoying it. I'd found a passion. Because we were working with less covers a night, I could start working with smaller suppliers. When you're doing 120 in a night, you can't have someone come in with 3 fish and say, I've got these amazing fish I caught, because that's going to cover, 1/5 of the customers for the night. You need enough for every night, and it was busy. So that allowed us to start working a lot more seasonally than we were. We always wanted to be seasonally and local, but that kind of changed it. So we started working with different suppliers, and we were finding people were really happy with what they were having, and we were working really hard to do all the dietaries as well. So, if we're going to tell you what you're going to eat, we're also going to cover vegans, vegetarians, gluten-free, celiac. So we will do our best to cover almost any dietary. And trust me, we've had some crackers, because people know that, if you come in Hobart and you've got dietaries, these guys will give you a full chef's menu. And we want to put as much love into a vegan or a low FODMAP as we would a normal menu. So that helps. And there's, one, it's great to serve people who can't eat a lot of things, but 2, it's a smart business option as well, because they're willing to pay good money to have that same experience. And there's a lot of people out there. I'd say a quarter of our clientele are dietaries, which, has its challenges, but we've kind of Cam, my sous chef, he's been with me since we opened the doors of Aloft. He started, I think, 6 weeks after Aloft opened, and he was a young, fresh chef. And I like to joke that over the years, he's Stephen Bradbury'd his way to the top. And as other people left, he just kept on growing and getting better. And now he is running Aloft, and he's the only reason I've been able to go downstairs and work on Maria. I stepped back from the kitchen. I was doing Friday, Saturday nights, doing service, but he would run that kitchen. He knows how I want things and what I want. And so he was my eyes and ears in there all the time, keeping the vibes high and the food how I want it. And so he will step up to be head chef as well in there once I kind of figure, like Andy, that role that I'm going to play between the two. I'm definitely not ready to be an executive chef and sit in an office. I want to be in both kitchens every day, but I do think they both deserve to step to those roles. So I guess for me, it's more just chef owner or restaurateur. But yeah, we kind of forgot where I was going with that there, but we worked our way back up, and we're making, as a business, we're doing less customers, and we have wait lists most of the year round, which is fantastic because we've built a reputation now, and we are, for 8 years or 8.5 years on, we're a lot busier than I ever expected to be. And that's allowed us to have the time and the money to build and open up downstairs, which is fantastic. I kind of always thought if I opened another thing, it'd be a small wine bar. And that was the plan. Maria, or whatever it was going to be called, was going to be a small wine bar, maybe on the eastern shore of the river down here. And then when we kind of Will said, hey, I heard maybe the guys downstairs are planning to get out. And I was like, don't be an idiot. Like, this is 3 times the size of a loft. No. And then after a few days of thinking, I came back to him and I was like, well, maybe let's have a look at it. And by and large, it's been, it's bigger, and we've got a bigger kitchen now down there, but I'm confident that we can do something bigger and better. And, I just have to make sure the love stays in Aloft, because it's the heart of everything. And it's been the reason we've been able to do what we do here. But I want to be in both those restaurants every day.
Well, it's amazing to think that you nearly left the industry and considered being a paramedic even. Now you've got 2 venues, and obviously Maria's only a week old, but what do you love about what you're doing now? I
love cooking. Most people who are a chef do love cooking in some way, shape or form, but I don't. It's funny, I cop a lot of shit about it. Uber Eats is my best friend at the moment. I don't cook at home a lot. I have a kitchen that was built in the 60s and hasn't really changed since then. I don't get a lot of time with my little boy and my partner. I get enough time to make sure that I'm not neglecting them, but if I'm going to cook at home, I'm going to do it properly, and I want to spend all day doing it, and I don't want to slap something together. So I want to go out on our days off and eat other people's food and just relax. So, as much as I love cooking and I love when I'm at work cooking for people, I think more so I like making people happy. And I love having people come up to the past and just be like, that was fucked. And I was like, thank you. Like, they're like, sorry to swear at you, but like, that was amazing. And I was like, I'm so happy. The first few times that would happen, I was just like, I don't know, these guys must be drunk. But then it becomes like a nightly thing. People are just coming up to thank you because it's a big open kitchen. And they're like, that was one of the best things I've ever eaten. And that was kind of what I love about this, making people come in and just go, I've eaten a lot of places, and that was something that I'll remember for a very long time. And I was like, we're not doing neurosurgery, we're just cooking for people. But if you can give someone something that makes them leave with that smile, then, I'm pretty damn happy with that.
Wow. It's amazing to hear the successes that you're having down there in Hobart, and an absolute honour to hear just a part of your story. Please keep in touch and look forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you. It's such an honour to be on this today. I really appreciate it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.